Alrighty, welcome to today's video, guys. In today's video we're going to be tearing into the top end of my XL250 Degree motor. About 12 months ago you would have seen that I rebuilt the bike. I tore it down to a bare frame and repainted the frame and I suppose restored the plastics and everything. But since I've done that and had it all back together, I've done about another 8,000 Ks on it, and that's rolled it around to 90,400 kilometers, which is quite a lot of Ks for a little 250. The only thing that's actually wrong with the motor at the moment is it's got a little bit of a rattle with the timing chain, but to replace the timing chain and all the guides properly, I have to pull the barrel off. So I've sort of thought, well, if I'm pulling the barrel off and it's got that many Ks on it, I might as well throw piston rings at it. While I'm doing that as well, I'm also going to be changing the cams out for camshafts that have been made for the AX-1 or NX250, which is a different model of bike. Basically the same motor except for the cams though, and basically that'll just give me, I think, an extra 3 or 4 horsepower. So small horsepower gain, but a large percentage when you only make 25 horsepower standard. So yeah, I don't know if I'm going to drop the motor out yet. We're going to tear the seat off, tear the tank off, and yeah, just see where we go from there. But first things first, drain the oil and drain the coolant. So we'll get into that now. Alright, so now that I've got the oil and coolant drained out of the motor, I've got to pull the tank off, pull the seat off and all the side covers, probably get the carby out and out of the way, possibly also remove the radiator and radiator hoses. I think I'll do that. And then once I'm at that stage, I will stop and have a look and think about whether or not I'm going to drop the motor out of the bike or if I'll leave the motor in the bike while I do it. I'm sort of hoping that I can leave it in the bike while I do it, as that would save a little bit of, I suppose, time and effort. But yeah, I'll just see how I go. Alright, so I've got the covers off and the fuel tank off. Now there's a lot of dirt covering basically everything under here, and that's not ideal for rebuilding engines. You don't really want to put much dirt in there. So while I've got this all off and apart, I'm going to take the gurney to this and just blast it down and clean it up. Basically everything off that I need to start pulling the engine apart. Now that I've got the radiator and the exhaust section, everything removed off of the bike, it looks pretty easy to get to. So pull the valve cover off first, then we'll release the tensioner, which will release the chain so we can pull out the 2 camshafts. Once the camshaft's out, we can unbolt and remove the head, which is that there, which then leaves us with this tiny little section of block. So in that area there, I think we've got plenty of space to go for. So yeah, before we start pulling the engine apart, just a few little things left hanging off the motor that'll get in the way. So because the cam chain runs on this side of the engine, we do have to remove this engine cover or side casing. So I'll remove this clutch cable line. This coolant hose here runs into the block, so that'll also have to get taken off. And then there's a few engine mounts on both sides. Coils disconnected, have to undo that, but yeah, this side looks pretty good compared to the other side. So yeah, I'll just jump straight into that and start ripping things off. So next step is, now that we've got the head off, is go into the workshop manual and read what it says, but it will say to turn the motor to top dead center before doing anything, so we'll do that, and then take off this chain tensioner and start removing the cams. Alright, so we've got the cams out, we've got the chain held up with a zip tie off the frame. Now, I've got all of my parts laid out and sorted nicely with all the bolts, if possible, back in the bolt hole they came from. I can't stress this enough, when you're doing things like this, you need to keep everything organised and neat and tidy, otherwise when you get to putting it back together, you'll have no idea where some of the stuff goes. But yeah, got the cams out laying on the ground here. So next step is to pull out these little bungs. I don't really know the actual point in those bungs, to be honest with you, but Honda have put them there. Pull them out and then you can get to the bolts below, and there's a couple other nuts that you have to get to, and you've got these other nuts that you've got to loosen off to get the head off. So now that we've got the piston and barrel off, I'm going to come over here to where we've got them stored. Piston, because we're replacing it with new rings and everything, we don't have to do anything with it, except for we're going to reuse the gudgeon pin and the little clips that hold the gudgeon pin in place, so don't lose those. Our next step, we're going to get the barrel ready to take the new piston. Now, because we're putting a new piston in, we need to deglaze the bore, and because this is a Nickel bore, which is a treated aluminium bore, so it's got some coating over aluminium to harden it, you can't really run a ball hone through it. People do run ball hones, and really you're supposed to use a diamond ball hone through them, but it can be a little bit dangerous as the balls can grab the coating and chip it off. And basically, if that happens, you need to get your barrel retreated and stuff, which is a bit of an ordeal. So to get around that with these Nickel bores, you can just basically scrub them with a 3M Scotch-Brite pad with a bit of WD-40 or something to lubricate it. So just got one of these pads, and we're going to jump in and rub it in that sort of motion to clean up and deglaze the bore, so that our new rings and piston will seat in and bed correctly, so we're not burning oil. But I don't know if you guys can see it, but I actually have some pretty decent good hone marks in there, and there's no real, well, there's no scoring of the bore going down, so this bore is in very good condition. Alright, so to tell when you need to stop, I suppose, deglazing or scotch brightening your bore is you'll just be able to feel that it's a bit grippier. It's not quite as smooth as it used to be. And because this coating's so hard, you won't put any scratch or hone marks in it as such. So it's quite, I suppose, difficult to tell when you've done enough. But yeah, I've sort of just gone, it feels grippier now. It's not quite as slippery. So I'm calling that good enough for me. Now, what we need to do is we get our new set of rings. This is the Honda part number for the rings. Oh, there you go. That is the Honda part number for the rings. So what we're going to do is check the ring gap of these first. The workshop manual says that they need to be 18 thou or smaller. So all we'll do, we'll get one of our rings. We will place it into the bore. And then with it in the bore, you get your new piston, which this is the part number here for a genuine piston. Then you get the top of the piston and you push your ring down into the bore, and that's to make sure that it's all level. And then you get your feeler gauges. I'm just going to check, so 18 thou, I don't know if you can see it, but 18 thou, get that one selected, and then all we'll do is in here we will make sure that the gap is no bigger than 18 thou. So because these are new rings, it does not want to go into that gap, which means that the ring gap is smaller than 18 thou and that piston or that ring is good to go. So you want to check your other compression ring, and then the oil rings have a different measurement themselves. So yeah, both compression rings are 18 thou and the oil ring is 35 thou in gap. So there you go. There we go. So our ring gap is 10 thou or 0.25 millimeters with the new compression rings. I won't bore you with checking the other rings, but it's exactly the same process. So now that we've checked the ring gaps on our new rings and we know that they're good to go, we need to work out what order they go in. If we pull up the workshop manual, here you can see that the top ring is supposed to be a square or rectangular ring. Our second ring has a chamfer on the outside, and then our oil ring is, well, at the bottom. So we'll go ahead and put those on now. Just when fitting rings, something to note that in colder or cool environments, sometimes you might need to warm the rings before fitting them, as certain engines can have brittle rings. So just heating it up helps them to go on a bit easier and will help cause no damage. So there you have it. That is your new piston with your rings installed. So this is all good to be thrown on the bike now. So when you're placing it on the bike, connecting it to the conrod, you need to take note that there's an inlet side and an exhaust side. So obviously the inlet side points towards the back of the bike and the exhaust points towards the front. In to the back. Now that we're on to the assembly part, just something I feel like I should mention. Everything that you do, you need to make sure that you're reassembling with some kind of lubricant. You can use assembly lube, or
you'd even be able to get away with engine oil, but make sure you lubricate everything. I know I didn't mention it about the gudgeon pin here, so just make sure everything gets put back together with some kind of lubricant.
So there you have it, new piston is installed with our new rings, and our gudgeon pin is held in with the same little clips that was holding it in before. And we've made sure that our inlet side is facing the back of the bike and our exhaust side is facing the front of the bike. So because we've got the piston installed and our barrel is ready, the next thing we need to do is prep our head. So because I've got the motor pulled apart and the head off, all I'm going to do is put valve stem seals in and relap the valves. Alright, so let's talk about what you need to do to relap your valves and replace your valve stem seals. I'm only going to show you on one valve because all of the valves are the same. If you can do one, it's the same on all of them. Now, because you're using pre-existing stuff and you don't want to get it all mixed up, I'm going to suggest that you only do one valve at a time to save you having to put things somewhere and label it and everything like that. But basically for this job, magnet comes in handy. So first off, you need to remove your bucket. So just pull the bucket out, and then you'll also have your shim. This here spaces the bucket off the top of the valve spring, which gives you your, I suppose, valve spacing and stuff like that, your valve spacing from your camshaft. So you want to keep those together. Then that leaves you with the top of your valve here. So you've got your valve, your spring hat, basically, or spring retainer, whatever you want to call it. Then inside you've got your little collets. The little collets are the thing that holds the top of the valve to the top of the springs, basically. So what you need to do to release those is push down and compress the springs whilst keeping the valve up, and then you can remove the collets. I've got this tool here, just a bit of round bar that fits over, and then what we're going to do is put a magnet down inside, and have the magnet about that far away. Now to stop the valve from pushing down, put a rag or something underneath the head. Then basically all you want to do is apply pressure and you just need to compress that valve spring. Then as you can see, we've got our two collets on the end of our magnet there. Do not lose these unless you want to buy new ones. Now, because our collet's gone, we can pull our springs out. These heads have two springs. There's a bigger outer spring and a smaller inner spring. Keep those together and keep note that the tighter coil of springs is towards the bottom and the more open coils are at the top. Now that you've done that, you can see there's nothing to hold the valve in anymore. You can just push it and there we go, the valve will come out. So, now that we've got our valve out, before we replace our valve stem seal, we're going to relap the surface so that we don't get any lapping compound into our new seal. So, because we're relapping old parts that haven't been leaking, we want to use a fine compound. This is just some cheap lapping compound that I found. When you get it open, just get a screwdriver or something and just apply a little bit of lapping compound onto the shiny surface of your valve, because that's the area that we want flat, that we want ground down to match our valve seat. Then what you want to do is get it, feed it into the bottom of your valve guide. Now what I do is I get a existing valve, an old valve that I've had laying around, and I put it in a drill. Then all I do is get a bit of blue tack, stick it on the end of this valve. You can use hand grinding tools and stuff, but I find this is a fair bit quicker, and sometimes the blue tack works better than the suction cap valve grinding stuff on old valves that are full of carbon and things like that. And then yeah, with your blue tack, just put it on. And spin it one way. Spin it back the other way. And then what I like to do is get up on an angle. As I'm spinning it, push the back of the valve to lift it up and down, just to, I suppose, help the grinding compound move around and get all the places it needs to go. Basically, once you think you've lapped it enough, pull out your valve, get a rag, wipe down the surface, and what you want is a nice even shine everywhere, no marks in it or anything like that. Also wipe out your valve seat without getting any grinding compound down near your guide, which could end up in your valve stem seal and wreck it. Once you've done that and inspected to make sure that it's a nice even grind, flip the head back over. With a set of pointy nose pliers, we can then grab our old valve stem seal and wiggle it out. There we go, then we've got our old one out. Then we want to grab our new seal. There is the Honda part number for the valve stem seals for this motor if you'd like it. And so this seal doesn't start dry when the motor's first running with this new valve in, I'm just going to put some assembly lube on the seal. And then basically all you do with a new valve stem seal is down there you just push it on and it just presses on, and you'll feel it, it'll feel like it clips into place basically. Then once you've got your valve stem seal into place, I'm going to put assembly lube all over my valve, so again when the motor first starts it doesn't start dry. Then all you do, place it in, push it through. Then on the top side you'll want to put your rag back underneath it so your valve can't be compressed. Then your two valve springs in the correct orientation with the tight coils at the bottom. Want to place that just back on top. And then what you want to do with your collets, you want to sort of put them together and get them sitting about where they need to in there. Then you want to apply a little bit of pressure to get them to sort of grab and sit where they need to. Then with your tool, so this is why we've got cutouts in the edge of our valve tool, so when we apply pressure we can put our finger in there and push down on those collets to get them to seat in place properly. Then you'll see they fall back into place where they're supposed to be. And all you do, well, I'm going to just put some assembly lube all around that and on the sides of the bucket. Then before we put our bucket back into place, we're going to get our little shim that sets our cam spacing. We're going to put it on top there of our valve spring. We're going to place our bucket, press that down into place, and then bang, there you go. That is your valve stem seal replaced and your valve ground back to give it a good mating surface so that your valve stem seals properly for a long time. Then basically all you do is repeat that 4 times and your head's done, ready to be reassembled on the bike. Got all my valves in, relapped, and new valve stem seals on now. So basically this head is ready to be plonked on top of the barrel once we get that going. So that basically just leaves a couple steps left before reassembly. So we've got to pull this side cover off so we can get to the bolt for this chain tensioner, so we can change that out, and so we can get to the gear so we can swap this chain out with our new one. So I'll start on pulling this cover off now. Alright, so we've got this side cover off, and I got a little bit carried away and didn't bring you guys along, but I took off, I suppose, this little clutch pressure plate type thing, and we need to undo this nut now. It's one of those weird fancy clutch nuts, so I'm going to need a special tool for that, so hopefully I can track one down soon. But yeah, so our next step is obviously getting to this timing chain, and the easiest way to do that, I think, is to pull the clutch basket off and undo the water pump, and then I'll be able to take it off, put the new chain in, and put all that stuff back together. So yeah.
Alright, so the nut that bolts the main gear onto the crankshaft, it's supposed to get torqued at 95 Newton meters. However, without the appropriate tools to lock the gear in place, it was too hard, so I just ugga-duggered it on the maximum setting of the torque wrench and called it good. And that's the same for the clutch basket, as it's a bit awkward to try and torque. It's got to be put to 60 Newton meters, and yeah, I just impacted it on nice and tight.
So now that we've got our clutch and crankshaft gear and oil pump all back on and stuff, we're going to leave this cover off for now, because when we put our barrel on and our head, we want to be able to position the timing chain and make sure that it's on our gears properly at the bottom. So next step is to put the barrel on, so we need to make sure our piston is ready to go. So if you read the workshop manual, it tells you that you need to stagger your ring setup 120 degrees apart. And it's always good practice to make sure that your ring gap, or the gap on your ring, isn't on the thrust side, which happens to be the exhaust side. So basically what I've done, and this is sort of what the picture in the workshop manual tells you to do, is put one there. When I say put it there, I mean the gap in the ring is there for the top ring, there for the second ring, and there for the oil ring. Now with the oil ring, because there's 3 layers, there's the top ring, the rippled ring, and the bottom ring. The, I suppose, 120 degree mark that you're going to go off is from the middle ripple ring, and then the top and bottom rings need to be separated by 20 mil. The workshop manual says that you need to put oil, pre-oil your rings and your skirts on your piston, and then put a thin layer of oil in the bore of the barrel. So that's to prevent it from doing dry start.
Alright, so now that you're dropping the barrel into place, after you've done that, you need to place the head gasket down and then drop the head on. Now the head bolts need to get torqued in a cross pattern in a 3-stage process. So that means you need to torque all bolts down to 15 Newton meters, then go to 30 Newton meters, and then go to your final 45 Newton meter torque setting. And then once that's done, you need to place your camshafts in place with the timing chain with some assembly lube on them, and locate them at top dead center with your bottom end. The little markings on the camshafts should be horizontal with the top of the head.
Cool. So we've got the bike all back together now. I have run it, bled the coolant, and done a few Ks on it to make sure it wasn't going to blow up on me. But as you can see, it starts really nicely. And it sounds really healthy and a lot quieter than it used to. Well, now that the bike is all back together, we've run it for a little bit, all the coolant's bled and everything like that. That basically leaves us with one thing left to do, and that's ride it. So yeah, that's what we're going to do now. So as you saw, the bike is doing fantastic, it's running sweet. So yeah, that's pretty much everything you need to know and do to rebuild or do a top end rebuild on one of these simple old little 250 engines. One thing to note is that after 1,000 Ks you'll need to change your oil. Just get rid of the break-in oil and put some fresh stuff in, and then you're right to go to your normal service intervals. So hopefully this video has helped you guys. If it has, please feel free to like, subscribe and comment. But yeah, anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.